Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shaped their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. You're listening to 919. My name is Jack Devnarain and this is Reality Radio. It's as real as it gets. Every Friday night from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. where we have a guest live in studio telling us the stories that shaped their lives. Tonight, my dear friend Joanne Joseph, it's so good to see you and to interview you because I'm returning the favor basically.
Thank you.
Joanne, author, newscaster, broadcaster, journalist, and my friend. How nice to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jack. So exciting to receive this invitation from you. Oh, and I brought you a gift, actually.
Really?
And this is a very long
Come on.
overdue
Oh,
gift. So
it
I'm not,
is
I'm
the
not
book.
a great friend. It's the book. It's the book.
This is beautiful. Thank you.
Depending on how our interview goes,
Yes.
I will autograph it accordingly.
I demand an inscription.
You'll get one.
I love that. Joanne Joseph, author of Children of Sugarcane. This is something we're going to unpack in today's interview because this is a huge part of your life.
It is. It has been for the last 10 years.
Well, maybe
or
let's
so.
start with this then. Hey.
Yeah, why not? I suppose start here and work our way back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Although Children of Sugarcane does start way back.
It does.
Way, way back.
It starts in the 19th century.
Right.
I wasn't there for that part. I'm not actually that old.
Are you
Yeah.
Okay, so a journalist who's reporting on stuff where you weren't actually there. Okay.
I have a good reason. But yeah, it started with my great-grandmother.
I see. So
as,
this
as
traces-
with so many of our ancestors.
It goes back to her story. Are you telling her story?
Well, I wanted to tell her story at the
Yeah.
beginning, but it didn't work out that way because there was just not enough about her in the archive.
Yeah.
I did actually manage to trace her in the archive.
Incredible.
Which it was incredible, trolling through just pages and pages and pages of digitized information about these just over 152,000 Indians who came to South Africa between 1860 and 1911 as indentured laborers
Yeah.
to work on the sugarcane plantations, the Natal government railways, the mines, in domestic homes, all sorts of commercial spaces. And, this was going to be a story of how and why my great-grandmother, the Lakshmi Velanaikan, came. And I found a trace of her and her siblings in the archive. They'd arrived on a ship called the Laurel Madras
Yeah.
in the 1880s. And, she'd worked on the railways together with her very young siblings. She was all of 21 when she came, Jack. So
Yeah.
the fact that she'd left her parents behind probably meant that something very catastrophic had happened in India. And they were forced to flee. And so I think that's how she ended up in what was to become South Africa a few decades later.
Do you
but
describe that in your book, though, what might have happened in India, or have you researched what might have taken place that led to them making the journey?
Yes, because eventually I ended up fictionalizing the story.
Okay.
And it was simply because there wasn't enough information about her, but there was a great deal of information written by mostly our wonderful academics in this country, historians, sociologists, and the like, about Indian indenture. And I was able to draw on a receptacle of a number of women's stories primarily.
Yeah.
That I sort of wove into the story of their time in India. My protagonist begins in India. It was really important, by the way, to begin in India at that point where she had a life, she had a family. She wasn't just, her life did not begin as an indentured laborer.
Of course.
Right? So it was important to provide that background and the background of why she would have left. She leaves, my protagonist Shanti leaves for personal reasons, but it's against the backdrop of an India where tens of thousands of people are fleeing because there's a series of droughts and famines, and it's exacerbated by the British system of commerce, society, and so forth that has essentially upended their lives and made it untenable for them to stay in their home.
And then you describe something about her, the conditions that she was forced to live in coming to South Africa. And, I also went through some of the recording that you had sent me. It was so touching because she was describing in such detail her resignation she's resigned to her fate almost, and she knows that even though the end is inevitable, she's going to keep herself, her identity. She's fighting to keep her memories. That was so powerful, and because you placed yourself in that situation, didn't you?
Yeah, I think you eventually, when the characters have been living for 9 years in your head,
Yeah.
you start, well, you know exactly the drill here.
Yeah.
They become so real to you. You hear their voices, you hear their stories become so alive, and so real to you. And the idea that this uprooting, I mean, migration is a huge thing that continues around the world
Yeah.
right now. But we can imagine for so many people, for so many millions of people fleeing their homes, they're doing it to escape something horrific. They love their homes and they
Yeah.
want to stay in their homes. But the situation in their homes is just not conducive to a decent life.
Yeah.
It may not be conducive to any kind of life. So, many of them are forced to flee. And what do they leave behind? I mean, they leave behind the motherland, they leave behind memories, they leave behind relatives, but formative events and people who have
Yeah.
shaped them. All of those things are just left behind. And if you can very likely never go back to those things, you can never return to them, what does it mean for you?
That was a one-way ticket, right?
Yeah, for many people it was. 3/4 of the people who came to colonial Natal
Yeah.
did not go back. They stayed.
What was it like going through the documentation that recorded people's lives? Each page would have been describing someone, a person and their history, their identity. That must have been incredible. That was somebody's great grandfather.
Yeah, it's it's the great grandfather of someone who likely doesn't know it's his or her
Exactly
or their
that.
great grandfather.
Exactly.
And you get the sense that, I mean, Ashwin Desai and Ghulam Vaid for me are two of the most important writers in this area.
Yeah.
Because they've taken that very academic, sometimes clinical history, and they've infused so much humanity into it. And their book, Inside Indian Indenture, meant so much to me because of that. Because they took the stories of individuals, and these are just snippets of their lives, because
Yeah.
the archive lacks autoethnography in the sense that you've got all the wonderful British bureaucratic records that give you an idea of the facts around people's lives, the cold, hard facts, how old they were, what
Yeah.
race they were,
Yeah.
what caste they were, for example. But it doesn't tell you the individual stories of those people. And that's what Ashwin and Ghulam have done a great job of doing. They've gone and they've excavated that.
Yeah.
And they have found those individual stories. And even if you only zoom into those lives for one small portion of what was probably a very interesting and difficult life,
Yeah.
you at least see a snapshot of that person, which just makes the experience of indenture so much more human and worthwhile.
They really put a lot of effort into that. I have that book as well,
Yeah.
and what I liked about it was how they turned the research of these people and their lives into everyday events.
Yes.
They actually made it relatable in that way, and it became so much more accessible.
I think so. I think they've done a great job of it. And Uma Depilia Mestri, who's also brilliant academic, also produced this book, From Cane Fields to Freedom. And there you have the actual pictures of people. It's a pictorial account.
Yeah.
And to come face to face with them and to touch history via those pictures or via Ashwin and Ghulam's words is pretty incredible. It's kind of time travel.
Why was this book so important to you?
Do you mean writing this book? Or
Writing
Inside
this
Indian
book
Indenture?
at this point in your life, you needed to do it. It became an obsession. I remember when you were doing it.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Because and you were consumed by the research. It was also exciting you to the point that suddenly you just committed yourself to this path, and nothing else mattered, is what I remember of that time. So it became important, not just because it was a great grandmother's story. Obviously it was that, but it was also because it became important to you at that point in your life. Why is that?
It was important not only because it was my great grandmother's story, but largely because it was my daughter's story. And that for me has been the focus of the entire book. That it took me 40 odd years to come to a greater sense of identity and history, and to locate me in a stronger way in South Africa, as a South African of Indian descent.
Yeah.
And I wanted my daughter to have that gift a little earlier on in her life.
Yeah. It's in telling these stories that we locate and identify ourselves. We're talking to Joanne Joseph, my dear friend, author, journalist, presenter, coach. We're going to take a short break and we will be back in a few minutes. This is Reality Radio. Don't go anywhere.
Reality Radio, as real as it gets. Only on 919. 919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech, or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412-365, Craig Hall 2024, or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for Reality Radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
And we're back, Reality Radio on a Friday night with me, Jack Devnarain, and in studio, our guest, my dear friend Joanne Joseph. Radio or TV, what do you prefer?
It's a difficult question to answer.
That's why you're here.
I know, but I told you, no hard questions.
Oh, right.
And you just keep doing that. Okay, I'll try to give you a nuanced answer to that. I love the complexity of TV.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
As you know, there are just so many elements to it. And in order for a production to come together, for each of those layers to be sufficiently served and served well is a beautiful challenge.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's what I miss about TV, that extra complexity of, okay, you've got the visual as well. What are you going to do with that to make it enticing? And then radio, quite different. I mean, for me, radio was also a leap a little bit more into myself.
Okay.
Because there was less distance between the listener and me.
Yeah.
And I was also able to explore sides of myself and take the listener along that journey and help them explore sides of themselves or areas of interest and curiosity that they'd not explored before. And I think they both serve different parts of one's personality and one's skill set.
Fair point.
So it's actually difficult for me to say, Jack, which I love more.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. It's like asking me, do you prefer TV or film?
Yes.
And I always say, what a stupid question.
At least I said your question was complex, not stupid.
No, I had to challenge you on that simply because I understand what you're saying, and there's so much that goes into both. It feels as if on TV, technically, you've got to be working a little bit harder on your awareness about where are my hands, what are my eyes doing, am I looking at the right, screen, am I doing the transitions in the right way. Radio, and let's be clear, this is my very first exposure to radio on this side of the interviewer's chair. So for me, I understand what you're saying when you say you had more feedback.
Yeah.
Because radio allows for that, right?
Absolutely.
So that becomes more accessible. You're listening to people and you're taking them on that journey.
Yeah, and you're also learning from them.
Right.
There's that huge cross-pollination of ideas.
Yeah.
Because you do go in with your kind of preconceived ideas or your perceptions of things, but what's really important is that feedback from your listeners has to keep you evolving as a presenter.
Because you're doing the same level of research for both, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You definitely are. The radio show, it's a little bit different in that television news has a very clear cut kind of definition of how it's done. It's a very clear genre. We rarely break out of that. But having conversations with people on air is different. It is unpredictable. It is quite a lot of it is unscripted.
Yes.
You script to death, believe me, but
Yes.
it never works out the way you intended. And that's some of the beauty of it, you know?
Yeah. I loved listening to your show because as much as I could understand, I could see what you'd stated up front, right? In your first 10 minutes, you'd know exactly where the show is going to go.
Yeah.
And by the time you open the lines, there are things that take you by surprise.
Yes.
For me, the fun part was listening to you pull things back together. Even if you were surprised yourself. I mean, there were times I remembered somebody would call in trying to make a point, but inadvertently revealing some raging racism within them.
Yeah.
That makes it just sucks the breath out of you, thinking, how did you even get here? And now you've got to try and maintain your composure, keep it together, focus on the point, and keep the show going. Otherwise, you could very easily be distracted by that, right?
You could. And sometimes you allow yourself to be if it constitutes good radio.
So you'd go there.
I would go there. And I had a
love that.
wonderful producer, my senior producer, Keniwe Sibola, always mention her by name because she's a gem.
Yeah.
And we worked beautifully together because she understood that if that was a learning moment for all of us, we ought to take it, grab it with both hands. So I once had someone call in and say something extremely homophobic.
Right.
And we had an interview lined up, and we just politely said to our very accommodating guest, please just give us a couple of minutes. We need to explore something on air.
That is incredible.
Yeah, and we did, because, look, these are real people having real thoughts.
Yeah.
You're in a fairly influential position.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
If you've got a moment to be able to just sit and dissect something for a moment, in and among all the breaking news you're doing and all the hard news content, you know, where a moment of humanity can come through, and you can convince someone that this great constitution that so values equality is not just a piece of paper, and it means that it's got to translate to real life.
Yeah.
Take that opportunity. We tried our best to do that.
Yeah. I believe you did.
Thank you. Because you don't always know that you get it right. Sometimes you don't, of course.
No, of course. So you'd allow yourself to go there, which is a very brave thing to do. Because firstly, you are saying that there are things that I'm willing to learn. I'm listening.
Yeah.
I'm using time on my show in order to engage with you, because this is an exchange, right?
Yes, yeah. It cannot be that sort of top-down God complex approach.
No. And it used to be that.
Yeah.
Back in the
exactly.
day, right?
It
used
did.
to be.
It did. And I think radio, just think of the format in itself. I mean, people, you're essentially doing TV and radio here, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I was mostly talking to people listening in their cars on the way to places,
Of course,
you
yeah.
know, and they've had a long, hard day, and you're actually tapping into a part of them that's fairly emotional after what they've been through over the course of a day.
Yeah.
Some people have had a great day. Some people have had a horrible day. Some people have been fired that day. Some people have a sick child at home.
Yeah,
some,
or they've lost something
some
dear
people
to
in the
them.
middle of a divorce or whatever,
Right.
right? And you're talking to people who are just experiencing some of the worst things that are happening in the country right now, in the world. And how do you talk to them, to their souls, instead of just deliver news and information to them?
The thing is, you take that on faith, though, because often somebody will call in about something that's really irritating them. It's at top of mind for them. It's motivating their angry behavior. You know, it's manifesting as anger.
Yeah.
But you don't respond to that anger straight away. You'll always give them a chance, and by the time they've ventilated it, you arrive at the thing that's driving it. And that, for me, is what's important about a real presenter. That's your strength, I think, because it's very easy to be distracted by, why is this person angry at me? Stop shouting at me, get off the air.
Yeah. Well, I perceive that as a weakness of mine rather than a strength, because I had to work really hard to become the person who didn't get angry.
Really?
Yeah. And the way you do that is, well, you work on yourself all the time. You learn to listen better.
Yeah.
And you have a programming manager who holds you into his office and
Okay.
does so he does, these snoop sessions where they're constantly listening to you.
Yeah.
They're listening out for your strengths and your weaknesses. And they're constantly helping you to improve if you have a good programming manager. There aren't many left in the country.
So
Sadly.
give us your top 5.
So, well, I'll mention the gentleman I worked with who was really fantastic.
Yeah.
Alistair Teeling Smith. And he was very influential in my radio career, because one of the first things he told me, and I tell the story repeatedly, but it bears repeating not just for presenters, but for every human being walking the face of the earth. He said to me, people are going to dislike you for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
They'll dislike you because you're a woman, because you're a black woman of Indian descent, because you are, because you wear your sunglasses on your head.
Right.
That was the example that he gave me. And he said, you have got to have a sense of self and a sense of integrity in terms of what you are presenting on air that is strong enough to withstand the hatred that you will get for whatever reason. And, where you're at fault, you admit that and you try and fix that. But you have to understand, people, as a woman, people will not like you. As a woman of color, people will have a prejudice.
A woman of color with an opinion.
Yes. And that, that's been, particularly, I think, for women of Indian descent, it's been very difficult for us to break out of that stereotype of being the demure,
subservient,
passive resistance stereotype.
Yeah.
Right? That has also traveled through centuries. Why do we have such a big mouth?
Yeah.
That's I think some people are really uncomfortable with that. And they were. There was a caller who phoned in at some stage and asked my producer, why isn't Joanne sweeter on air? I liked her the other day when she was sweet. And
because that's my picture of you as an Indian woman.
Yes. So I think we're all walking around with these preconceived ideas about one another.
Yes.
In real life and on air and everywhere else. And those need to be broken down. So that was really valuable. Once I went in expecting to be disliked, it made it so much easier for me to say what I thought, to debate the way I wanted, and to take the abuse afterwards, if needs be, even though it wasn't pleasant, to be able to withstand it.
So to stand in your integrity and to believe in the story or the subject that you're dealing with, right?
Yes. And also not to be so unmoving that your opinion can't be changed on something.
Right.
If the evidence or argument that is being presented by anyone proves to be stronger than yours, don't be so proud that you won't accept that this is an opportunity for you to learn something and for your thinking around it.
Well, you see, this now would be a challenge for me. I would need to learn that skill.
Everyone has to learn that
absolutely,
skill,
absolutely.
Yeah.
See, but now that you are here watching my nascent steps into the world of radio, you're going to tell me, Jack, you really need to listen more. Jack, you think you're right all the time. You need to stop this chauvinistic behavior of yours. You're going to tell me this.
My husband still says those things to me all the time, so I'm not convinced I've actually got it right.
I love that. But I love the fact that you were getting the sessions where you were being reviewed, right?
Yes.
So what was the memorable comments about your one strength and one weakness?
One of my weaknesses initially was actually to not to lose my temper in a huge way on air, but to get irascible.
Okay.
To become irascible on air, to get irritated. And actually, you've got to hear people out before you get irritated. Okay. So that's something that I'm still learning. But, a big part of that learning started to happen in radio. And, one of the things I think I was fairly good at was breaking news. So I was complimented for the way I could do that.
Yes, and I've heard you do both. When you did break news, I thought, okay, this is important. And when you got a little bit irritated, I thought you should be more irritated. Yeah, And we'll be back with Joanne Joseph, my dear friend, author. We'll talk a little bit more about the book, but more to come about your life and career as a journalist and as a coach. Still to come on Reality Radio. See you just now.
The Feel Good Drive with Nicole De
Marketing
Silva.
manager of Sunshine Tour, BC Mchali business deals. Do you do that stuff?
Everything is mixed. You can't try and disassociate yourself from any part of the business or any type of the work. When I joined the tour, it was strictly marketing. Your role isn't solely as a marketing manager. You're a client services director. You are a commercial manager. You're doing so much and almost about convincing people, convincing them to be a partner of the Sunshine Tour. And then once they are, convincing them that it was the right decision, continually throughout the process, throughout the partnership.
Every day I'm hustling.
Monday to Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. only on 919. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for Reality Radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919. Reality Radio, as real as it gets.
It's Reality Radio every Friday night on 919 from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And we're talking about the remarkable stories that shape people's lives tonight with Joanne Joseph. And there's so much that you're doing. I mean, obviously there was the research and then there was the book. There was the journalism. I'd love to, I want to tackle the journalism thing because so much of your work as a coach comes from your work as journalist presenter. So what was your journey into that, journalism presenting?
It was purely opportunistic, hey, Jack.
Really?
I didn't even study journalism.
Didn't you?
No, I didn't. I studied drama and film and English, and then I studied literature. And I had two very forbearing and deeply loyal parents who said to me, okay, if this is what you want to do, if it's what makes you happy, then you must do it. And it was because I was able to do what I loved that I kind of fell into the right thing, I think. Because I had not intended to be in journalism at all.
I cannot believe that. I thought you were just hardcore, cold-blooded journalist.
No, certainly not. And that's why, I mean, I've worked as a journalist for so many years. And I've developed the skills. And, okay, I've done the courses along the way and that sort of thing. But the foray into the book and certain other things I'm doing now are sort of a return to what I initially hoped to do, which is, I think I'm a little more of a creative person. And I've slowly started to re-explore that side of myself.
I love that. So you're actually going back to the heart of you.
Yeah, I think so. Very slowly. It's taking me time. I'm still very much caught up in the world of news and communications and that kind of thing, and media. But I do love media as well. It's been a wonderful opportunity. It's given me a good life. I found a husband in the industry, which I didn't intend to do either. Imagined myself to be happily single for a lot longer, and then, really liked my bulletin editor at SABC and thought, okay, I think I'll keep him. But it's really given me a fantastic, an exciting life.
Yeah.
And a sometimes unpredictable life, which I love.
Which you love.
Yeah.
And as an artist, as a creative, that's one thing that's just simply going to be the guiding principle of your life, is not to expect anything because it's entirely unpredictable. Living and working as a freelancer means that there's no 9 to 5 to structure your day or your life or your career.
No.
It's whatever you make of it.
Exactly. Sometimes work starts at 5 o'clock in the evening and finishes at 6 o'clock the following morning, depending on what you're doing and what's required of you. But I really love that sense of unpredictability. It's strange because I'm an A-type personality. I'm a huge short-term planner, long-term planner, a major strategist in my own life.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I mean, I don't want to really know from 1 month to another what I'm going to be doing. Not always.
Yeah.
I want to get a call from you and say, let's do a radio show. I want to, I want to get a call from someone and say, okay, could you do some media training for me?
Yeah.
And the following week, I want to get a call from someone saying, will you do a corporate video for me? So it's the variety, really, that makes work so interesting for me.
Let's talk about that media training. Who are your clients and what do you teach them?
Many of them are corporate clients,
Yeah.
but some of them are from non-governmental organizations, activists, and so on.
Yeah.
And they're people who, some of them from government as well. And essentially, they're people who need to learn how to communicate with the public via the media. It's a fine line that you have to walk as a journalist, because you're not in any way supporting the idea that they get the right to go out there and be spin doctors. You're teaching them honesty and integrity in front of the nation.
Right.
And that's the thrust that I go in with, that you go in transparently.
Yeah.
You tell the truth at all times. If you've made a mistake, you apologize. But a lot of the work, Jack, is, this is the fascinating thing about media training. People think it's mostly about how you sit in front of camera, what you wear, what makeup you put on and that kind of thing. But it's really work that goes to the heart of who people are. It's culture specific. It goes so deeply into people's upbringing, their life experiences.
Yeah.
All of those, as you know, play out in the way they communicate with other human beings and how they present themselves to the world. And often when you are training people, even the top, but particularly with the top executives, you start to unpack things that they've been holding and carrying for a very long time. So personal things that have happened, that have wounded them in some way or the other, held them back. Imposter syndrome among many black people in particular, and women that you train. Psychophysical blocks that prevent, natural speech and forms of expression because you've grown up in a religion or a very gendered home where you haven't been given a voice. All of these really interesting things come through.
What do you do at that point? I mean, it depends on how debilitating it is.
Yes.
Do you end up referring them for professional counseling or anything, or do you have methods to work through that?
There are methods to work through that. I mean, most of it is making them aware of it and in as gentle a way as possible, first of all.
Yeah.
Many of these people are quite high-powered individuals
Yeah.
who need to go back into their role and do another day's work efficiently the next day.
Sure.
So you don't break them down.
They become vulnerable, though.
They become very vulnerable in the moment, and you respect the fact that they allow that vulnerability to come forward. But it makes them much better communicators, Jack. So, once they're able to tap into things that are potentially holding them back, either physically with the voice and the body, or mentally, then they're able to surpass those things, and you build a kind of confidence in them that makes them better communicators in the long run.
That's incredible. It's a very privileged thing to do, isn't it? Because this person is allowing you a window into their lives, into their world, into their inner world.
Yes.
And you're drawing on that in order to make them better communicators.
Yes. And it's a strange thing because communication is not prized in this country as an extremely important part of anyone's leadership role. In the States, for example, it's very common for people who are being groomed for leadership roles to be trained as communicators.
Yeah.
Not so in our country.
Yeah.
So you get into a very senior role at an organization, and then all of a sudden you're asked to speak in front of people, and you've not really done it before. And so to be a leader of a certain caliber, to be respected by your people, to have your intellect so deeply respected that you've been promoted into a high position, but not to be able to communicate with your people can really hold you back.
Do you find there's a correlation between the way in which a person communicates and their intellect, or can that be a misleading one?
That's a very tricky question. Some people are great communicators because they've got the gift of the gab.
Right, exactly,
right?
yeah.
But they're not always honest communicators.
Yeah.
They're not always authentic communicators. And sometimes you'll find that the people who probably technically are among the most flawed communicators are so authentic at times and so real that you can simply disregard the technical aspects because they're truthful, honest people.
Yeah.
And you somehow you connect very much with the core of those people as speakers.
Yeah, and you I suppose you learn to appreciate their uniqueness, even if it might come across as some kind of an obstacle to speech and communication the way we know it.
Yes.
It may not be polished, but if you believe them,
Yeah.
that's the thing that you want in a communicator, right?
Yes, yes. And that's, I mean, that goes back to my years of drama school at Wits, and also at school I was very privileged to have Kenlyn Sutherland as my drama teacher. And the people from whom I learnt that, or the craft of using one's voice and that sort of thing, were people who believed that it was not necessary to have elocution, for example, because it removed markers of identity from your speech. And so it's actually lovely to hear people's origins, the language groups they come from, the particular types of phrasing that come from that, little cultural quirks in the way people speak, based on their authentic selves and who they actually are in terms of their identity. And I think removing those can sometimes be a problem because you sanitize people's speech that way. Right? And you don't want to do
standardize
that.
everything, don't you?
Exactly. You don't want to do that, especially in a country like ours. We've got a wide range of accents and language groups and so on. You want to keep some of those things.
And you can
for the
kind of place
authenticity
people
of it.
and you have an idea of where they come from based on how they speak.
Exactly. So I love that. I love that about our country.
Yeah.
That's why I love training people in this country, because actually their quirks are so endearing.
Yes, so you want to
train them.
work with those quirks, don't you?
Yes, you
Yeah.
do, and you want to make them work.
Yeah, I, when I was coming through the industry, I was trying very hard not to sound that you could place me anywhere because
Yes.
of my. I wanted to create an accent and simultaneously create a character
Right.
that you wouldn't necessarily know. Okay, this guy's a Durban actor from who grew up in the 70s and 80s in a certain reality. I realize I can only remove myself from that to an extent.
Yes,
And the rest of it is worth keeping.
absolutely. Because I was going to ask, why would you want to?
Yeah, well, in the same for the very same reason, I call myself Jack.
Yes.
It's a nickname, not my real name.
Yeah.
But it's about Jack because I know that people will remember it. It's a nickname. See, Mtaba is looking at me thinking like, who are you? I don't know you anymore. It's my very dear uncle Jackie, who was my role model in everything. I just used to follow him around, and I used to be his runaround kid.
Yeah.
And so he was Uncle Jackie and I was Jack.
Oh wow.
And that name stuck, and it stayed in the industry as as my as a nickname, and it worked because people didn't have to work out the pronunciation.
Yes.
It's simple enough that people will just use it. So in the same way, I thought I need to kind of sound in a way that isn't going to leave you wondering who this person is or what this character is.
Yeah.
I wanted to standardize it to the point where I could fit into any character.
Yes.
Because the last thing I wanted, and I think it's the same for you, you do not want to be known as an Indian anything.
No. I mean, why would you?
Exactly.
You want to be known as South African.
South African.
Definitely. And you want to be known as well. To me, I still kind of embrace the Steve Biko Black consciousness philosophy. So I want to be known as a Black South African of Indian descent.
Right.
It's important to me, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not primarily Indian in the way one understands a stereotypical person from India to be.
Yeah.
Right? India is, our connection to India as people of Indian descent is hugely interesting. I think it also depends on what part of the Indian community you come from. People imagine us to be a very homogenous community.
Yeah.
We're not. We're extremely heterogeneous. But also, So I have friends whose families regularly go to India, right? And they feel at home in India, and they speak the language.
Yes.
And every time there's a wedding, they'll go and do their shopping there and so on. It's been a bit different for my family. And it's not that I disrespect my Indian heritage. I'm quite proud of it, in fact. But I don't have the same type of connection to India. India's a satellite in my life.
That's right. When did you visit last?
I haven't been to India.
I haven't been to India either.
So is there something wrong with us, Jack? Because someone...
that's just the fact of it. We a minute to go before we take our next break. I wanted to ask you very quickly, how many people from your drama group at WITS are in the media today?
Oh gosh, that's a very good question. I think about 10.
That many? That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. It is a good thing. It's but they were a very talented class, and I'm still surprised that so few actually made it.
That's a worry for me, because I remember at UKZN when I was going through, my 2 years of drama there,
Yeah.
apart from my dear friend Leander Reddy,
Yes.
I cannot think of a single other person who is involved in drama now, or film, TV, production, theatre, or just the
Yes.
media generally. I think
Yeah.
that's a huge loss. They were all incredible people, and I
Yeah.
wished I wanted to share my friends with the world.
Yeah.
But for now, I can only share Joanne Joseph because it's reality radio. And we're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in a minute talking to Joanne about her incredible work, sharing the stories that shaped her life.
Reality radio, as real as it gets. Only on 919. 919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech, or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412365, Craig Hall 2024, or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919.
It's 919. This is Reality Radio on a Friday night with me, Jack Devnarain, and in studio, Joanne Joseph, my dear friend. It's the stories you have and the life you have, it's just so remarkable. I look at it in awe and I just think, I'm so glad you are you.
Thank you, Jack. I don't always see my life that way. I mean,
Yeah.
the things I'm really grateful for are my family, the
Yeah.
fact that people have afforded me the chance to have a good career, because people have to believe in you in the industry. You just don't go any further unless somebody is invested in you. And I've had a few people along the way who've done that for me. Is it an extraordinary life? I'm not sure. It's definitely different to what I imagined it to be. I imagined myself as kind of lecturer teaching
Oh, is it?
teaching literature at university or something like that. But yeah,
If you were to visit India, and I know you will at some point.
yes, I will.
What would take you there? Why would you go?
I have a very good reason for wanting to go.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever worked with Magansri Pillay, who is quite an amazing director, and she's, we're talking about the possibility.
Yes, I've worked with her. Yes,
Yes.
I've known her since since university days.
Yes.
Actually, yeah.
So she spoke of you the other day.
Okay, good. She remembers too. Then, okay.
We're talking about the possibility of actually doing a documentary on indenture.
Oh,
Because we both feel that it's just an issue that hasn't been widely explored in the country and still needs just a little bit more exploration in a different medium that's a bit more accessible to people than perhaps a book.
when I first met you, I thought you should be an actress.
Really?
Just straight up there, I just thought, wow, you need to be acting. Is what I thought. But then you were absolutely so convincing as a journalist. I wasn't going to question that, but. But now,
maybe it was just acting.
yes, but that's how I do it. I find myself in the most insane position sometimes. I'm asked to give a presentation or a talk at some place, and I have a different version of an imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I just simply take it as I'm playing the role of,
Right.
And-
That's a good way of thinking of it.
and then it makes sense to me
Yeah.
because being an actor allows you to create the fantasy of the role,
Yes.
and that role can then empower you to do anything.
So that's really interesting because I've never thought of it that way. I mean, I have often found myself in a situation where I know that I do act at times. I mean, there are times when journalism does require that, or when presenting requires that. And you're primarily doing it when everything behind the scenes is chaos. It descends into chaos some days.
Yes.
And tapes don't play and things are not ready to go to air. I mean, you go on there and you start the show. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of the show sounds as though it's all sketched out. It is never finished by the time you go to air.
Is it
right?
never finished?
It's never finished.
Oh, wow.
So there's always part of it that is still hanging in the air. And it's always a kind of evolving, developing beast while you're on air.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time you're pretending that you're calm. That's mostly what you do. That's the sort of the largest form of acting that you do, the most common form, I should say, because a large percentage of what the viewers don't hear on air is the things that go wrong. And you're pretending to be calm when things go wrong. You're pretending that you know where you're going next. You're pretending that your link is up and your reporter's there when you know he's not. So I've done a little bit of acting in answer to you.
But it's amazing though, because you are presenting a face. This is a veneer of perfect control, and your listeners take that for granted, right? Because that's what you're telling them.
Yeah.
In a sense, though, and this happens a lot when I MC. Regardless of what goes wrong, if your audience believe you, and if you're upfront and transparent with them, they will forgive you anything.
Yes, they do actually.
They do.
Yeah.
They'll understand if you say to them, "This has just happened." It's unbelievable. It's crazy. Despite our comprehensive and detailed plans, this has still gone wrong. It's fallen down, but we're here to pick it up.
Yeah.
People will absolutely give you that time because they know that you're being straightforward with them and upfront.
Yeah, and let's face it, the media has changed. Broadcasting has changed radically in the last 30 years in this country. So remember the days when we all sat down for the 8 o'clock bulletin, which was a complete institution on SABC.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the one bulletin of the day. I mean, they started off with a weekly bulletin. It's so hard to believe. But in the 70s, they were doing one bulletin a week. And we've gone from that to 24-hour news. And it is impossible that nothing will go wrong in the space of 24 hours.
Yeah, there's far too much happening.
Yeah.
And we all knew it was 8 o'clock because my dad would always make the TV louder.
Yes.
Because this is somehow going to help him to absorb the news better.
Yes. And they kind of expected you to be there. It was a thing. It was
Yes,
like
it was
going
a
to
thing.
church, you know.
I'm afraid.
there at 8 o'clock.
I'm afraid I've become my dad now. Because I try to explain to my kids why this is important. You need to follow the story. I tell them, and they would look at me and wonder if I've just gone mad. And I realize that I am where my dad was, and my kids are where I was, and they don't care because they've got important things going on in their lives, right?
Yeah, and on TikTok.
And on TikTok. How just talk about social media a bit. How has that impacted your work as a journalist?
I think, well, it hasn't had a radical impact on my work personally.
Okay.
Because I simply don't participate much.
Okay.
And it's a choice that I've made because I chose to be on air because I felt, well, I have something to say when I'm on air. When I'm not, I don't always have much important stuff to say. Sometimes it's okay to shut up and for people not to know what you ate for breakfast every day, or I do draw that line between my private life and my public life. There are some things that I will share that I really want to get out there on social media, but most of the time I'm quite quiet on social media. And Eusebius McKaiser and I, who's one of my best friends, as you know, and we used to have constant conversations and laughs about this because he loved social media and he lived part of his life on social media.
Oh yeah, no, he used to stoke fires all over the place.
Exactly. He was wonderful. But he was very clever in that he used social media as a tool once he left radio to keep doing what he was doing.
Right.
I've not seen the need to do that, Jack. if an opportunity arises for me to be in the public domain again, where I'm asked to give my opinions, I will. Social media is not a big part of my life because I don't want it to be. It's not important to me.
Yeah.
I know it's important to a lot of other people, and a lot of people get employed at television channels and radio stations these days because people think they will bring the huge following they have on social media. It doesn't always happen that way. It works for some, and it doesn't work for others. But I think that, when I have something to say, I will. Social media is not the first place I go to do that.
So it's an
necessarily.
option.
For me, it's an option. And
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't think it's hurt my career in any way. People have
Good.
respected my choice to be a private person most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you actually place a premium on your presence then, because when you pitch up, you pitch up. And you're not going to be sharing ideas, thoughts, impressions, and emotions on social media for the world to criticize and comment on, because you reserve all that for your private space.
Yeah, I do. And it's quite an interesting thing that you say that, people put a premium on that. I don't know if they do. Perhaps most people see me as too quiet on social media for a media person. But I don't feel that I have to fit in with anybody's perception of where I speak or what platform I use. When I have something to say, I'll find the right space in which to say it, and I will say it.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I'm not irritated by certain things I see in the media right
Sure.
now. I'm worried about the state of journalism in the country.
What worries you?
Well, the juniorization of newsrooms
Okay,
is
yeah.
a huge thing. And I'm worried that we're not getting the analysis that we need. And it has a material effect, particularly in election years and so forth. But I feel that when the time arises, if the time arises again for me to be in those spaces, then I will bring my skill set back to those spaces. And do the best
you
I
miss in any way this whole election cycle now, all the electioneering, the vote canvassing, the manifesto launches?
I'm a bit tired of it,
Yeah.
I've done so many elections, as have many other people who've worked in the media for a number of years. But I do miss the analysis. So I really enjoyed reading and preparing
The
for an
critical
election.
analysis.
Exactly.
Oh,
and
yes.
when you were at the ROC, at the Results Operations Center in
Okay.
Pretoria, you would go live, the results would come in, you would immediately respond to it. And I loved the kind of atmosphere and the ambience in a place like that was so alive and electric.
Yeah.
With with the future of the country hanging in the balance at that point. So there are moments like that I miss. I miss working with wonderful people in the industry who were so talented that we sparked on air. But I mean, if the opportunity arises, I'll do it again. But I will not put myself in the situation where I'm working in a situation where I feel we are under-resourced. The skill set is not there. It sets a presenter up for failure.
And you also have to be so aware when there is some kind of a station bias or there is some kind of a commercial interest that's driving the agenda.
Absolutely.
Do you pick up on that quite quickly?
Yes. I mean, I've got into trouble for it before where I've said
really?
something on air that would offend sponsors or, and I've had a senior member of management run
Really?
into the newsroom and say, "Oh, you've just made our lives very difficult." And my response to him was, "Well, that's why you earn the big money. You'll sort it out.
Right?
It's not my job.
Right?
It's my job to ask the questions and get the answers."
Yeah.
And not to be affiliated with the advertisers or the government or Labour or whomever it is. I'm asking questions. I need to be able to ask those questions from a position of integrity and neutrality. And that was really important to me.
Do we have enough of those platforms, completely impartial, unbiased, absolutely married to critical analysis? The way I remember Eusebius very much wanted that.
Yeah.
To be able to have a platform for his own voice,
Yes.
to voice his own opinions,
Yeah.
and they were informed opinions.
They were deeply informed opinions. They were
Yes.
informed by reading, consumption of really
Yeah.
in-depth information in a very critical way. Look, I don't want to pretend that we work objectively. None of us does. We all bring our subjectivities and our bias to whatever
Okay,
we're
yeah.
doing. But it is possible to apply fairness at all times as journalists. And that is the most important thing to do.
So the world that you think you're going to leave to your daughter, with all the skills that you have and the journey that your life has taken you on up to this point, what is it that you hope for her?
I hope that, and this is, I'm going to steal her school's wording around this. I hope that in whatever she chooses to do, she is able to live a life of significance in one way or another. And that means whether she chooses to be someone who rescues horses for a living because she loves animals, or if she chooses to be a lawyer, or if she chooses to be unmarried, or have a host of children, whatever she chooses, I really want her to be happy with those choices.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to be my choices for her.
My final question is, when you decided to embark on a course of study that included speech and drama, were your parents suitably disappointed in you?
They are such bad Indian parents, those two. Shay, my dad is late as of August last year, but they're such outliers. They have been such outliers in that we come from a very creative family. My dad had done a lot of protest theatre, and
wonderful.
So it's a family that appreciates arts and culture. So when I said I wanted to study drama and my brother wanted to study music, they were more than happy for us.
And at least they weren't wondering, I wonder where this came from in our child. It makes complete sense.
They probably realized it was their fault.
Absolutely, and so they should take responsibility.
Yes, but thankfully, I mean, it shaped our lives, being able to make those choices for ourselves. And that's been a huge thing with me. I've tried to give my daughter as much exposure to everything as possible so that she can make the choice for herself and not have an overbearing parent to tell her what to do.
And with that, we give thanks to our own parents.
Indeed.
Thank you, Joanne. It's been amazing. Thank you for the gift.
Oh, pleasure, Jack. I will inscribe it for you shortly.
Yes, I hope you do. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been Reality Radio with me, Jack Devnarain, and our guest, Joanne Joseph. We'll see you again next Friday night on 919 from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Join us then.